Welcome to the Table Podcast series with Bridget Johnson. Each month, we give you game-changing conversations about K-12 education and leadership. Join us as top educators, field experts, and administrators share actionable strategies to transform your school community. Let's dive in.
Welcome to The Table, the podcast where student-like professionals, educators, and change makers come together to share stories, insights, and ideas for building communities where everyone belongs. I'm your host, Bridget Johnson. Today, I'm super excited to welcome Manny Almonte, founder of Mastermind Connect, a men's collective dedicated to empowering men of color to connect with their passions, nature, and inner selves, and Camping to Connect, a BIPOC-led nonprofit confronting teen social isolation by bringing young men of color into the outdoors for transformative experiences grounded in emotional vulnerability, mentorship, and brotherhood. Manny's work, including his award-winning short film, Woodhood, has been recognized by the New York City Department of Education, the Brooklyn Borough President, and the National Recreation Foundation, which honored him with the 2023 Robert W. Crawford Achievement Prize for his creativity and dedication to increasing outdoor access and inclusion for youth from undeserved communities. So inspiring. Welcome to the table, Manny. So good to see you. How are you?
Thank you, Bridget. I am all right. Thank you.
Just all right? Come on.
I'm good. I'm good.
Fair enough.
Like I was saying before we hit record, again, it's high season, the beginning of it. So getting into the flow of it, when I say high season, it's outdoor programming, obviously, in the states that we're in. So.
Yep, absolutely. Fair enough. So appreciate you taking the time today. So let's jump right in. Before we talk about Camping to Connect and everything you've built, tell us where this started for you. Who were you as a young man, and what did you need that you didn't have?
That's a great question. I was a young man who grew up in the Dominican Republic, specifically Santo Domingo, first city of the Americas. And my parents, they are from the middle of the island of the Dominican Republic, and they met at university, both scholars. My mom is an attorney. My dad is an engineer.
Okay.
And they divorced when I was 3 years old, and I only say that because I feel that my life has been very serendipitous, right? So my parents, they share the same birthday.
Oh, wow.
I have two brothers, one sister. She's the youngest on my father's side, and I have two sisters and one brother. He's the youngest on my mother's side.
Okay.
So I have three sisters altogether.
Yep.
All this, and on both sides, I've always been what do you call it? I had great step parents, right? So I've always been embraced as simply the oldest, and that led to an amazing experience that I didn't appreciate then, but I appreciate now, especially working with the young men that we work with, and the broken families and displacement, single mother household, sometimes single father household. So that is something that I never actually
experienced
thought through that lens until I experienced in adulthood, right? Others sharing their experiences and how that affected them, and how I was affected by having benefited from basically four parents.
Wow. So, Mastermind Connect came first, a collective of progressive men committed to camaraderie, accountability, and mutual support. What was the origin story of that, and how did it lead to realize that this work needed to reach young people?
It wasn't about young people at all when this started.
Okay.
It was about myself and some other men from New York City. I used to live in Brooklyn, now I live in Denver, Colorado. I lived in New York City for a good 30 years. And around 2015, 2016, I have found myself at a place where, although I'm very social, extroverted, I was a business owner at some point. I owned a club in New York City. And because of I think loyalty is big to me, right? And especially when it comes from me. And reciprocity is also important to me, right? Not necessarily a tit for tat, but simply there's got to be an appreciation and a relationship in which, value is shown, right?
Yeah.
So at that time, I was going through a period where I was distrustful of
Mm.
getting close to people, letting people get close to me, because I have been affected, business wise, in a very, very heavy way at that
Okay.
time. But then I realized, I felt, that it wasn't healthy for me. It wasn't
Mm.
necessarily the the way to go about this. I
Sure.
didn't realize I was feeling depressed at the time. I was basically functioning,
Mm.
depressed, and I was having conversations with some of the friends that I trusted, and they were also going through the same thing. But what we realized is that we would show up in a way where we want to flaunt the wins, right? And
Yeah.
that's why this whole concept of check in with your strong friends, right? The whole
Yeah.
idea of men like to compete, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we are, what do you call it? I wouldn't say groom, but as we go through the
Conditioned.
no, the system is one in which men compete. We don't
Mm-hmm.
communicate, we talk about our feelings, but it's always about the new car we have, the new job we have, how much money we're making, the new watch we got, what kind of watch it is. All of these things that show, what we try to show us our value.
Right.
But we don't talk about really what's happening behind, the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot happening there. There is
Yeah,
a lot
a lot.
happening with them, and we will go into circles where everybody's showing up the same way, and everybody's talking about topics as if we basically have the information, we know things, because we again are competing, and the word compete comes from the Greek comparison, right? So we are
Mm.
mirrors of each other.
Yeah.
But if we're
Wow.
only looking at who's better and who's doing
Mm-hmm.
well or best, then we always wearing a facade. It's a mask,
Right.
right? So having conversations where we became vulnerable in that
Mm-hmm.
space, we found value in it. And one thing is vulnerability, but vulnerability, when you're talking to people who care about you, want to help you, needs to be matched with accountability.
Sure.
And that is what began this concept of the Mastermind Connect, because the mastermind concept actually came from the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And
Okay.
two of the guys have read the book, and we're talking about books and concepts. And the idea of mastermind is that when two or more minds come together with one single purpose, goal, area of focus, they form a third mind, a mastermind,
Mm.
the mind of the collective, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are mastermind groups out there for networking, for business mostly, uh, and it kind of started that way,
Okay.
like maybe business and networking. But I actually personally hate networking.
Why?
The whole business card thing, exchanges. I'm super social. I don't need like
No,
even the
that's
space
fair.
to connect with people.
Yep.
But the framework of that I
Uh-huh.
dislike.
Got it. That's
But
fair.
I said, what we need is true connection,
Sure.
right? Not
Yeah.
not the okie doke, not the fake, superficial
Uh-huh.
things, but like true deep connections. That's where
Yep.
growth happens. And so why don't we create a mastermind group that is
Okay.
about connection? It's about brotherhood, right?
Okay.
So Mastermind Connect was born because
Mm-hmm.
of that. And what led to the work with the youth? Well,
Yeah.
one of our members, we were sharing different experiences, right? So whatever that we were passionate about, like, or wanted to try something out, we would
Mm-hmm.
put it on the table, and the rest of the guys would agree on supporting it or doing something about it. So
Yep.
it began with working out together.
Okay.
One of the guys was a fitness trainer in New York, very
Uh-huh.
well known. um I was big into cigars and scotch and that sort of lifestyle type of thing. So we did a
Yep.
cigar night, and then
Uh-huh.
another of the guys was into Muay Thai kickboxing, and
Okay.
we went and did the thing. We went to do yoga. Somebody wanted to
Okay.
try a Bikram yoga, and
Okay.
imagine 20 black and brown men taking
Showing up to
a
Bikram
yoga,
yoga.
and we did that, right? So one of the guys was actually volunteering at an after-school program as a basketball coach, and
Mm-hmm.
so his passion, he's from East New York, Brooklyn, and his passion was working with youth, because that he found when he was younger, a lot of resources that came that way to the nonprofits that offer mentorship and after school opportunities, right? So his name is Frank Mena, and Frank was
Mm-hmm.
saying, "Well, I would like us to do something for the kids that I'm working with.
Okay.
Uh, you know, the type of things that we're doing right now, right? Working out together, like doing this things." So we said, "Okay, let's do it." And we took over a middle school in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. We had access to the school. We brought kids from all over Brooklyn,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a Saturday, I remember, and about 15 of us, the men, were, created this program for the day where we were doing some panel, some workshops. We gave them lunch. We had some fun, with
Yeah.
that, and then we had a boot camp session at the end.
Okay.
We had about 100 some kids there, and putting it together, I was leading the logistics of everything, and it was like, okay, one more thing, that I have to do. Okay. But then when we were in front of these kids and we saw the impact, and we saw the impact for the kids, but also for the men that were there,
Yeah.
it says, oh my God, like we may want to do this again. We
Mm-hmm.
still had our doubts, but then by the following week, the people who led the after school program were telling us, so the boys who didn't attend, they were talking to the boys who attended, and now they're asking if this is something that can be done every Saturday, because they missed out, they want to do it, and the ones who attended keep asking, when are we doing it again?
Wow.
So that's how we began.
Oh, wow.
There's a need, we're here, we can do it. And we
Mm-hmm.
started volunteering for nonprofits, and
Okay.
the Department of Education heard about it for New York City. And
Mm-hmm.
then they ask us, hey, can you come to do a career panel over here? Can you help us with this? And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we
Sure. Why
can do
not?
it. And that's how we started working with the youth, because of the things that we were experiencing. We translated them to them, right? So obviously
Yes.
you're not going to do cigar nights with them, right? So
Right. But it's so interesting, that need and that ability to create community and from a place of, not wanting to be vulnerable and competing with each other. It's so interesting and important to talk about with young men because there's so much in terms of feeling isolated, feeling like you're the only one, feeling like you can't share. So the fact that you started that at an adult level and then brought it down to the kids level so that you're modeling the behavior that that you want the students to have is super important. Let's talk a little bit about the teen social isolation piece, because I think that's really important. How bad do you think it is, and what are you seeing in young men right now that you work with when they first come to you?
well, it is an epidemic. It's already named as an epidemic. There's plenty of research studies that support it, um, and it goes beyond youth. It's affecting us adults.
Oh, absolutely, sure.
um, there is a level of isolation that comes from, you know, basically the roadmap that we have taken as a society. We want to blame everything on technology, but
Mm.
we are divided as a country,
Yeah.
politically and socially. We are divided by class. We are divided even by race, not because it's a construct. It's definitely a construct, but it has been used to divide us. Religion, all these different things. The idea of independence. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you can be an entrepreneur. You can do it all by yourself. You know what I mean? It's a facade. And it takes us away from the village.
Yeah.
Even the idea of upward mobility. And when you have opportunities for, you go to college, or whether you go to college or not, there's something happening. You're from New York, but there's an opportunity in Atlanta or LA. Now you move over there, and then your friends who grew up with you, they go to, Denver, Colorado, like I am here, or Chicago. All of a sudden, the family unit, your community, the people who you grew up with, who traditionally would sort of stick around, we
Mm-hmm.
are all,
All over the
distance
place.
now becomes
You're
an issue.
disparate. Mm-hmm.
And video games, social media, now you are attached to these things, even AI now, right? Now you're talking to AI like if this is your friend, and basically to kind of, not yourself, but like something that gets to know you, and
Yeah.
basically, like ChatGPT is just going to tell you what you want to hear most of the time. It's going to frame things in a way that is like, yep, you're right, or
Yeah.
like, you know what, you may not be right about this, but yep, you're kind of right, so there's this false validation, and we know we all want to feel validated.
Sure.
When it comes that way, it's not true, genuine, right? So we're not
Mm-hmm.
challenged with accountability once again. So technology has played the biggest role. Social media,
Yes.
you know, uh, and bullying. A lot of things are happening there because of the way that we see ourselves compared to others, and compared to others who are presenting something that may not be genuine either. And you get in
Right.
little clips, little curated,
Snapshots of, mm-hmm.
things, um, and you are just swiping, scrolling, and there's no moment to pause to really think whether this thing is true or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get a little dopamine hits where now the real life becomes boring. Going outside becomes too challenging. I can just see the world through this screen. All of these things every day, they compound,
Yeah.
and now we are affected, mentally and physically, by it. So it is an epidemic, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
just in America. But again, we have a lot of things start here, and then we're definitely not behind the curve on that. I think we're
Right.
ahead of everybody else. So
Yeah. Fair enough. And so, from what I understand, there's a particular kind of loneliness that young men carry in particular, and often aren't given language or permission to name it. What do you feel like that? How does that present itself in urban communities? And how does it show up in schools and in the streets?
well, we have the issue that young men in this society, they are told by their parents, especially because they went through a version of this and their parents went through another version of this,
Sure.
about how they should be or behave, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
being tough, about, not showing emotions because then you're going to get bullied, or you're going to be, they're going to pick on you. Um, not sharing things at school with a counselor or principal because that could lead to them getting in further trouble. Authority figures in the United States, that has been
Sure.
used against kids of color, and
Sure.
this is just,
Yeah.
it's not that they're not lying. They're going based on actual, that it's true. you
Mm-hmm.
know so you're hiding truths, and at some point you start getting lost on what
Mm.
is and what is not, and
Yeah.
you put sort of right in the middle.
Yeah.
And when you have spaces like that where you don't trust your teachers, where you don't trust the school principals, where you don't trust your counselor, when you don't trust your family, your parents, adult figures, then what you're relying is on your peers who are all going through the same thing, or predators who understand how to manipulate that. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's how you end up, in gangs and situations that are not going to be beneficial to the kid. And that kid is going to grow into a young man. And then that's a cycle that's going to keep repeating itself, right?
Yeah.
So then you have, because again, social media and what society has deemed valuable or not about somebody, the way you dress, the way that what the car you drive, whatever you go, your ability to do some things, we start then seeing ourselves under almost like a caste system. We're casting
Sure.
ourselves out,
Yeah.
um, which is such an interesting concept, right? Talking about independence, freedom, America, and then you go
Right.
to basically casting yourself and putting yourself in a little box
Mm-hmm.
for life, you know, and it's very hard to come out of that. It's because the system, right, is systemic,
Right.
is to keep you there. The education system,
Mm-hmm.
is actually has been so watered down, and even from the beginning of it here in America, I don't know if you're aware of this, but and you're in education, so I'm sure, it's framed, from the Industrial Revolution. It took it actually from the Soviet Union, to prepare a workforce, right?
Uh-huh.
Workers, not thinkers, not
Networkers.
entrepreneurs, not philosophers, not people who can,
Have their own
analyze and make
independent
their
thought.
own, just a workforce. And then there was a decline of that because after World War II, America, went through the Great Depression in the 30s, and then, we were manufacturing, and a lot of jobs came in, and the GI Bill and all the different things that help us, rise up as a nation.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody said, hard times create strong men. Strong men create better times. Better times create easy
Easy
life.
living. Mm-hmm. Easy
And,
living. Mm-hmm.
and it's a cycle, right?
Yep.
So now we are at a stage where we're sort of paying for, all these different things, and then we are affected by the predators, right? The manosphere, the podcasters, who are understand that there are kids that they are seeing themselves as less than, they
Mm-hmm.
are looking at girls who don't see them as prospects, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, as it's their fault, you know what I mean? And now you have an us versus them mentality again, so away from the village, and
Yeah.
there's always somebody out there who's capitalizing on things.
On
So
that.
politics, division, like there's always the predators who make money, and then they present themselves as I'm successful. Look at me. You may want to be like me. I'm
Right.
talking a good game, but what they're really doing is that they are manipulating, and they're doing things that are really leading to more depression and more kids really not seeing their true value on themselves, because
Right.
again they're still comparing themselves to even those people in those podcasts, right?
Yeah, it's so much, right? That these young men have to think about, all of us have to think about, right? And have to carry. Um, and not a lot of places where they can actually talk about this stuff and process kind of what's happening in real time. It's a little scary actually to think about all the things that the adolescents these days are having to kind of manage on their own in some ways. Let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about the outdoors, because that's really what I wanted to spend some time talking to you about, because I really, it's fascinating the work that you're doing. Outdoors has historically been kind of an exclusive space, right? Racially, economically, culturally. When you bring young men of color into nature for the first time, what barriers are you navigating, both internal and external?
Wow. You know there are fears, there's shame, there's what we're creating is a sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
The key to our program, to Camping to Connect, is to be able to relate, right? So these
Yes.
are the facilitators are men of color, and we're working with young men of color.
Right.
So we understand culturally, the background of where these kids come from. There's no shame. There's like, we understand. There's no
Yeah.
code switching. We can talk freely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think one of the beautiful parts to me of this program is that when we are looking for the volunteers, the facilitators, the mentors who are going to be working with these kids,
Yep.
we, even though it's called Camping to Connect,
Mm-hmm.
the connection is a program, right? It's not the camping. So it's not
Yeah.
connect to camp. It's Camping to Connect. And what we really focus on is in some level of emotional intelligence, because it is social emotional learning out in nature. That's our
Sure.
program.
Okay.
What we seek is connection. So the outdoor leadership, how to work out there with youth, lead a hike, set up a tent, like all that we can teach.
Sure.
We can also teach our curriculum, right, that focuses on like how we navigate, again, the different conversations, and the emotions that may come there. But
Mm-hmm.
most of the guys who are the facilitators, talking about being able to relate, they themselves never went camping or hiking
Right.
before. They themselves may have come into this space, a year ago.
Uh-huh.
They're not outdoor professionals.
Right.
These are men from the kids communities
Uh-huh.
who they see what they know. They have experienced what the kids have experienced for longer. You know what I mean? Feeling
Yeah.
isolated, like they don't belong in that space. Like they have done
Uh-huh.
it for years, many more years than the kids have.
Right.
And they understand what the impact on their lives has been, right?
Mm.
So being able to have those men lead these young
Mm-hmm.
men, where these conversations are happening, when the kid speaks to a fear of the dark, of the quiet,
Ooh,
which
the
by the
quiet,
way
especially New
is a
York
trauma
City.
response. It's a trauma response. We work with kids from big cities. New York City is where we started, right?
Mm-hmm.
And think about the fact that some people, they fall asleep with the train tracks
Yeah.
going, nearby, ambulances, the subway sometimes is simply rumbling, underneath it.
Yep.
Stuff happened at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
Somebody in the corner yelling.
Yelling.
And even like watching TV. I don't know if you know people who were falling to sleep watching like true crime or these things with murder, like literally falling to sleep under that.
Mm-hmm.
Then you take them out to nature to sleep in the tent, and they cannot sleep because it's too quiet.
Yep. I might know a couple of those people.
You know? So, when it's getting dark and the kids have to wear a headlamp, we actually do a night hike the very first night.
No.
And we it's not a long hike,
Okay.
but it's an experience for them to see as they are navigating a trail from the campsite,
Mm-hmm.
how all of a sudden you hear all the birds and all the noises. Because you have this rest, you go in there when they are asleep. The nature is basically quieting down.
Mm-hmm.
And to make it to a ridge line, top of a hill, of a mountain.
Yep.
And we asked them to turn off their headlamps for a moment.
Ooh.
And we asked them to do that exercise for just a minute. Turn off your headlamps and close your eyes and just give it a minute and slowly open your eyes and see how your eyes are going to adjust to your environment.
Mm-hmm.
Because at first when they open, it's like it's so pitch black, but then they start actually seeing. And it's like, you see, just give yourself time. You adapt to the environment, you adapt to what you think is the dark.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have the moonlight. And many times, obviously depending on we have a full moon or not, the kids even ask, can we go walk back a little bit without the headlamps?
Oh.
And with it, yeah, we could do it for like a minute. You want to make sure we don't trip or anything.
Be safe, yeah.
But to go from like fear of the dark, not even wanting to go on the night hike, to experiencing, it's almost transformative. The first night, for them to feel, wow, like, yeah, it is peaceful here. It's quiet because now once they turn off the headlamps, everything quiets down. Like all the birds start, stop, and now we are in a moment of Zen. Very first.
I love that. I love that. That is so great. So, you kind of walked us through what a first night looks like for those young men that are on there. But what happens from the moment they decide to sign up? Like, a young man says, all right, I'm doing this Camping and Connect thing. What happens from the moment they kind of sign up and they arrive to kind of the campsite, wherever you're picking them up from, to kind of when they leave? Like, can you walk us through what that looks like for a young person?
Yeah. And before I walk you through it, I would recommend for anyone listening to watch our film. It's a short film documentary called Woodhood. It offers a window into the program.
Okay.
Usually we go out with small groups of about 10 to 12 young men. There's some exceptions in which we may go up to 20. And at that point, we have enough facilitators and have a site where we sort of spread out, split for some things, come together for some other things. But when we started with like 35 young men at one time camping at Governor's Island in New York City, right, off of New York Harbor. And then we started to go down to like 25, 20, 15 to hit the sweet spot of like 10 to 12 because we wanted to have like intimate spaces and conversations, right?
Sure.
Less risk management and like
there
and more like we are here.
We're just we are connecting. We're here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the first thing we do is that we do an opening circle when we arrive, and we talk about intentions. Why are we here? What is your why? What is it you're carrying? With you. That's a worry, a concern, a fear, whether it's to be there in that moment or that you've been dealing with at home, right? And we frame it. We offer some examples, and once, they're hesitant, but once
sure.
when the first kid goes, and the second is like
open the floodgates.
Permission. It's like, you know what? Yeah. So, and even with a kid that may be holding back in that moment, it models like what the weekend
Sure.
is going to be like,
Yeah.
because it's more of a rite of passage experience. And it's not a one-time deal. The kids
Hmm.
can come back to other programming, day hikes. In Colorado, we do fly fishing, mountain biking,
Oh, cool.
besides the camping weekends. There are camping weekends that are going to be like your first time here.
Hmm.
And it's a very specific structure for that. And then there's others where the kids are returning and we sort of fostering, the growth, right? Like,
Sure.
what
Yep.
did you learn? How can we now teach you something new?
Sure.
Um, and yeah, so it's setting intentions, it's setting, talking about our community agreements. What is it that we're coming with? How we would like to be treated, or sort of our non-negotiables type of things. But
Hmm.
coming together and agreeing to these things so we all can be held accountable, to the things that we agree, in that moment.
Absolutely.
And then from there on, the kids, they are taught, how to, pitch a tent, how to um, start a campfire, safely,
Hmm.
how to put it out, the why of things, why we're
Yep.
doing this. There's land acknowledgements, but I don't think our land acknowledgement is the traditional. When I say traditional, is what you see a lot of, like, in events. This is the land of the,
Yes.
you know, XYZ, the Arapaho, and we're
Yeah.
sitting in the land. I think we do it a little bit different because for us, it's about being able to relate. So
Right.
native people in the United States, for us people of color, whether you're from Mexico, DR, directly from Africa to America, we
Hmm.
come from somewhere, right?
Right.
Our peoples come from somewhere, land, and they went through the same thing that indigenous tribes went through here when it comes to colonization, when it comes to
Sure.
uprooting, when it comes to taking the land from us.
Hmm.
Something the kids are usually impressed about is the fact that most of these trails, the traditional trails, the Appalachian Trail, the one in the Pacific Northwest,
Hmm.
these were not made by white people. These were the indigenous tribes used these routes to traverse,
Yeah.
to actually move from season to season, to go from the
Right.
north, to the south, south to
Mm.
north. They were going to hunting, different things they
Yeah.
were doing. So we are enjoying basically what they created. And if you were to look at it through that lens, and the kids are usually like, what? It's because we have associated hiking with something white people do,
Uh-huh.
and something that we maybe are experimenting with. And the reality is that native people, indigenous people to this land were doing it, and wherever our people came from was the same.
Right.
And the experience of uprooting, of the taking their land, their resources, the
Hmm.
way it happened here, when we're sitting in these lands and we're honoring the people that came before us, it's not just the people that came before us in that land.
Right.
We are respecting, honoring the people who were the tribes who live in that land, but we are connected. We're deeply connected. Our stories are deeply connected. Therefore, the respect that we're going to give that land, those trees, the things that we do there are not just words. It's not just like a nicety. It's the beginning of understanding that we come from the village, and sitting around the campfire was the way that we share stories. We share about the day, the hunting for the day, our ancestors, the griot.
Yeah.
We have African ancestry.
Yes.
The griot was the storytellers. People who were sinners, they were looking at that incredible scene. If you have
Yeah.
watched it, about telling about how this guy was singing, telling stories, and they had all these amazing visuals from different cultures and different
Yes.
times. But that's what the griot was. And
Hmm.
those conversations really happen around the campfire, in community, sharing a meal, cooking together. Somebody hunt this thing, somebody seasoned it, somebody prepped it, somebody cooked it
Hmm.
from the village. And then we all ate. So
Yep.
even when it comes to our meals, the kids are the ones who are cooking. We
Nice.
teach them, we tell them like how and what
Yep.
is it they're going to be doing, and we oversee it. But we are not doing it for them.
Hmm.
And a kid that on Friday night is cooking, another group is cleaning. The very next day, then the guy who was cleaning now is cooking. So they don't
Cooking
feel
is
like I'm just cleaning or I'm just doing
right.
this, or the other guy is good and having it better than me. But we, the adults, the facilitators, we only guide, because we understand that there's value in that. We get to see their personalities also. We,
Yeah.
we get to see like how to work with them. And one of the things that I like to say at the beginning of every trip, and many of the facilitators do the same, is that we're not there showing up as authority figures. We're not your parents, we're not your teachers or anything like it. Like, we are men from your community. We are brothers. We are a brotherhood. We want to
Yeah.
welcome you into this space that we are sharing with you. We are sharing an experience, right? So I came here camping to connect. I
Right.
want you to come here camping to connect. But what that means is that I'm having an experience the way you're having an experience. What I do affects you, what you do affects me. I want to be able to enjoy this time. I want to get to know you. I want to be able to do things with you, not for you, right? With you.
With you. Yep.
Because as much as I would like to show you some things and teach you some things, if you will have it, I would like to learn some things from you.
Yeah.
I'm of a certain age, and whatever worked for me when I was, your age, and whatever's happening, I'm living in your world now, right? So there's a lot of things that I want to learn from you, So it's setting that stage where we are here in community. We are here connecting. We're doing things together. I'm not the teacher, or nor you the student. We are here, both
even
being
exchange.
the teacher and the student.
Yep, even exchange. I love that. So how did you decide, why nature specifically? Why did you decide nature would be the vehicle, not the classroom or a community center or a mentorship program in the traditional sense?
I think nature has a nurturing power. It's the source. It's the source. We are part of nature, by the way. Right?
Yeah.
So being able to come into a space where it may feel challenging at times, we need that. Coming out of the comfort, of sitting on this nice chair that I have here that reclines, but to be able to come out of that routine and one of the things I like best is that there's no cell phone reception most of the times, right? So there's no meetings, there's no emails, there's no text. The things that bring me anxiety that I'm doing because every day it's like automatically I'm doing it. I'm forced to stop. I'm forced to put the phone down, put it away. There's no, phone calls. My wife, my niece, the dogs. Like, nope, you got it. I'm gonna trust that you got it.
Yep.
Trust that you got it, and whatever happens, then we'll deal with it.
Yep.
But I'm out here, and everything starts to calm down, right? So whatever stresses you came with, life is still lifing, right? Things are still happening, but it forces you to ground yourself, to connect with others, because we're cooking together and we're doing all these things, together. We're going on a hike. We're trusting each other, looking out for each other. And what I believe is that healing happens through connection. I think the whole team embraces this philosophy, and it's sort of a trifecta. We all part of nature.
Yep.
When we are able to connect with others, be in commune, we are closer to connecting to self, because we're mirrors of each other, right? So as we have interactions and exchanges, we feel a certain way.
Sure.
We may get validated, we may be challenged. Like, all of these things are happening. But we are now forced to be it's not a phone call that I can just drop, or text. I can stop texting.
You have to engage
and put the phone away. It's not social media, right? It's literally, I have to spend time for 3 days with this person, and if I want to eat, I'm going to depend on them to prep the food. You know what I mean? So what happens then is, like, now I'm in an environment where I'm feeling the breeze, I'm hearing the birds, I'm the sounds, I'm smelling the pine trees, like, or the flowers, like all these things that are happening around me. I am taking off my shoes and walking, putting my feet on the grass and grounding myself and feeling that, being able to release, right, that electricity, that energy, and receive new, right? So when you do that, you're connecting to others, you're connecting to nature, and you're part of nature, then you are able to connect with yourself
Right.
at a higher level. We think that we understand ourselves. It is not until the time comes where you are forced to really, really see who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you understand, who you are. So healing happens through connection, and I think nature is the great equalizer. And I think that nature has a nurturing power that is always there, but we neglect it and we don't
Mm.
tap into it. And we don't tap into it many times because we have written ourselves out. We feel that we don't belong. And it may take someone to take us by the hand and show us that we do. And I think that's part of our mission.
Oh, I love that. And so you talking about the emotional vulnerability, and that's a core element of your work. I can see that it's not just leadership skills or outdoor skills, but really building some actual emotional depth. And so you just talked about how you creating those conditions for the students by communing in nature and by grounding yourself and like no social media and those things. And so for teenage boys who've never been asked to go there, what does that look like for them? How are they kind of initially experiencing this?
Before I tell you about the teenage boys, I'm gonna tell you about the men.
Okay,
The
fair
first time that
enough.
we went camping, the first time that we went camping upstate New York was about 4 hours north of New York City. It was in Andes, New York, in the Adirondacks.
Okay.
And I remember uh, a few months prior, I had gone camping with a couple that took us to Lake George, me and my
Yep.
wife.
Mm-hmm.
I had not gone camping in decades. I did it in Dominican Republic. My family's from the foothills of the highest peak in the Caribbean. And I had forgotten about it. Like living in New York City, being caught on that wheel,
Yeah.
of the hustle and bustle of the city. You
Uh-huh.
look at upstate New York and you think, that's maybe for like an artist that, wants to get some pictures up there, or some rich people that have a second home,
Yeah.
up there in the mountains. They go from Thursday to Sunday, they go
Mm-hmm.
there. Um, and we have so much going on in the city, right?
Yeah. All the time.
So it wasn't until this couple invited us, and we were doing things, in the city, going to their apartment for, have a great music and some
Mm-hmm.
wine, and they have a rooftop. We did that, Coney Island at night, summer night, sitting by the beach, having a picnic there. It was great. So this couple was like very creative, right, in this curating some spaces. So when they
Okay.
invited us to go camping to Lake George, it's like, yeah, like we trust
Yeah, sure.
your
Yeah.
your judgment and ability to
Right.
create. So my wife and I went there with our dog, and it was incredible. Like it was the peace that I had. That we're talking until late night around the campfire, and just I remember like me chopping the wood and like putting it in. Even the process of doing that, it was so therapeutic, right?
Uh-huh.
And I came back to the group, and we're talking about what to do the following months or following 2 months, right? And I proposed to go camping,
Okay.
hiking and camping upstate New York, and they were like, "Hell no, come on, man! That's
We don't do that, right?
what are you talking about?"
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, "Listen, man, like I don't like to get punched in the face." I was telling one of the guys, Mike McConnell, I was like, "Listen, Mike, I don't like to get punched in the face, man." And I went to Muay Thai kickboxing twice, and I got punched in the
You got punched in the
first time,
face.
and I went the second time because you were passionate about that. So I need your support. So got convinced like 14 guys to go up there, and it wasn't even raining when we got there, so it was
Mm-hmm.
challenging. But coming together, working together, one of the guys lost the keys doing the hike, and
Oh no.
we said we're not leaving until we find these keys. And we went there and we were scouting the thing and found it, and the feeling that we got celebrating coming down, like we're all wet, like feeling, right? So now we are, around the campfire, and one of the guys, this guy is like bodybuilder, like a bull, built like a bull. We're talking about fatherhood, a relationship with our fathers. Not some of us
Mm.
were fathers, we're all sons, right? So we were having these conversations around the campfire, and all of a sudden, this guy just starts sharing vulnerably and starts, breaking down crying, and to see other men come around and, hug this bull. It's
Yeah.
like, man, I see you, like, me too, like, and then the other person starts sharing about how that relates to their experience. It was so powerful that the following year we went camping. It was about 35 of us.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
But we didn't have more. It's like, we don't have enough room. Like, we gotta wait, and then we did
Yeah.
it like twice in that year,
Mm-hmm.
and we've been doing it ever since, right? So that's what led to us wanting to share this experience with the young men,
Okay.
right? So for them, what we have heard and understood is that they have a perception of the world and of others that's very judgmental, because they are judged constantly,
Sure.
being young
Absolutely.
men of color. And to be able to have a space where they can, first of all, breathe,
Mm-hmm.
like, that was one of the most impactful things that I heard year one. A kid saying, "I feel like I can breathe here."
Wow. That's powerful.
To have a kid say, share around the campfire, a kid that was struggling on his first hike, and he came with two brothers, and this is a kid one out of five. He's the oldest,
Mm-hmm.
single mother. This kid felt the pressure, 17 years old, of being like the man of the house.
Yeah.
But these kids would never leave that apartment. They would only go to like a doctor's appointment or go to school, because they lived in the projects and downstairs gang activities. So the mother, these kids are playing video game all the time and very out of shape, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this kid was struggling on the hike, struggling.
Yep.
That kid, within 2 months, he got his, what we call, a trail name. His name was Spotter. So why they gave him Spotter, because he was spotting, like, a little lizard over here, or like a butterfly, a deer over there. Like, this kid was now in the front of everybody else leading the
Wow.
hike, right? Because we were not waiting just to have a camping weekend. We would have day hikes, and he would come out.
Sure.
So at first he was very frustrated,
Mm-hmm.
but then he learned that it was actually a challenge for himself, and he didn't want to be in that apartment anymore.
I love that.
And he was feeling like he didn't have to be responsible for his kids or his mother's feelings or well-being. He was free to be and exist as a kid, to be a
Wow.
kid. So that was very powerful.
Absolutely.
And the second year, that kid came back, brought his cousins, and he was like so excited about the fact that he was, we had empowered him to be a leader.
Yeah.
And now we're going to that weekend that we had very specifically with him. We're camping, doing a campfire. During the day on Saturday, we do a sort of a long hike,
Okay.
about 5-6 miles, and we end up by this pond around the base camp. And they get in the water. We supervise it, and we know
Yeah.
what the
Sure.
restriction is. It's marked up, so
Uh-huh.
we're in there. And we're talking about, around the campfire, about peaks and valleys for the day. So what was a low point, something that, was scary, concerning, didn't feel too good, versus the high point, the peak, what was the height of the day for you? And this kid is saying, well, my valley was when I was at the lake, with the guys. I thought I was going to drown. And I'm like, what do you mean, you was going to drown? Because I was like right next to him.
Yeah.
Because it says, I put my hand back, catching a football. They were throwing like a small football.
Yep.
And my head hit the water, and to like my ears and my, almost like my face. And I thought I was going to drown in that moment. And I'm like, okay, but you didn't. Nothing happened. Because again, I remember that moment. But yeah, but that was going through my head, and I was like freaking out a little bit. But then my peak was that moment, and I, what do you mean by that? And the kids are there, right, around the campfire. He says, well, first I didn't drown, but then he mentioned another kid that was there. So Jonathan, was actually like teaching me how to float. Right?
Nice.
It was teaching me how to float. So I was now in my back with the water the same way that it was when I was like falling back. but I was like just floating, and I
And
was up in my
relaxed.
arms, and I was like at peace.
Mm-hmm.
And then he promised that he was going to teach me how to actually swim, right? And I'm like, wow, that's so
All in
powerful,
one moment. Yeah.
so powerful. So what a moment, says, tell me more about like that feeling of drowning. Like you never been like like a pool. He says, and this was the part that got me. He said, I've never been in anything like this. Says, oh, you've been to like a small lake. Says, no, I never been to the beach. I never been to the pool. I never been to the lake. The only like place that I've been to like water like that is a bathtub.
Wow. Wow.
Even right now,
Yeah.
the kids started crying. Like everybody there.
Oh.
The kid was 17 years old. The kid
Mm-hmm.
was saying that he's never been to a body of water, only his bathtub.
That's huge.
And the fact that we were able to do that for him,
Yeah.
to offer that.
Life changing.
Yeah,
Life changing.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
you got me over here getting all
yeah.
misty.
Sorry.
Wonderful. It's
I was
wonderful
reliving
work
the
that you're
moment. It was
doing. No, that's
incredible
a
time. Like everybody at first
incredible
was
moment
quiet,
for
and
sure.
then everybody started sharing about,
Absolutely, they did because now the door is open, right?
oh yeah, oh
The
yeah,
door is open. After who can't share? Who doesn't feel comfortable sharing after that? He can be that vulnerable in that moment to say the only body of water, which is not a body of water, his bathtub is
bathtub,
pretty powerful.
But
Pretty
it
powerful.
brings me to the other thing. It's like we have kids who have shared things with us
Mm-hmm.
that they haven't shared with anybody,
With
friends
anybody.
at home, and they tell us, right? Like kids who have come out to us.
Yeah.
We have kids who have shared very deep things, and it stays within the confidence of the space and the
Sure.
group. There was only one time that we had to, by law, like report back to the parents, which is the kid was having suicidal thoughts, right?
Right.
And we were helping him navigate that and everything, and offer counseling like past the trip,
Mm-hmm.
right, beyond the trip, because we can pair mentors with the kids if the kids are interested in continuing, and even coming into an apprenticeship program to
Mm-hmm.
become a junior facilitator. But yeah, things like that was the one time that we had to actually report back, like, this is
Sure.
happening, this is a conversation,
Yep.
please don't just jump into it. uh,
Mm-hmm.
Whatever steps you need to take, don't make him feel like guilty for sharing that or for
Right.
feeling that way, because there are things that are affecting him to actually make him feel that way. It's not
Yeah.
just out of like watching a movie, right?
Sure.
So it's not a story that he's like telling himself. So as I'm saying this, I remember we basically were counseling not just the kid but the family,
The
the
parents.
parent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
No, absolutely. So, man, you're really building two things here at once. The Mastermind Connect for the adults, and the Camping to Connect for young people. And those organizations clearly feed off of each other because those adults are now, working with those students. But um, what does it mean to have men who you've seen kind of make that leap or have that inner work or that growth show up and model that, for the students that you're working with? And are you seeing that now? Have you had the program long enough to see where the students who've come through are now helping out as well?
well, that's a beautiful thing. That was going to be my answer. It's a great thing what it has done for the men of the collective that have found this space of mentorship, of caring, of being able to offer something that they themselves have just realized or come into, and share with the younger versions of ourselves. But then to work with this young man, and when they become now young adults, to be able to come into this brotherhood, right? To be able to have
Mm-hmm.
access to that. When I was talking about the apprenticeship, we have young men. When we started in 2018 officially,
Mm-hmm.
unofficially it was 2017. uh, Kids that were part of the New York City Department of Education's Urban Ambassadors program. They
Okay.
had about 150 young men every year, high school juniors and seniors, and the
Mm-hmm.
program was to help them get to college, right?
Okay.
To give them all the tools. They would meet every Saturday morning
Okay.
at different colleges around New York City. John
Mm-hmm.
Jay, St. Francis, Hunter, and
Awesome.
sometimes even at the headquarters of the Department of Education downtown Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
And we were tasked with curating some workshops on we call the program Mastering Your Craft.
Okay.
And then we had once a month we're doing career panels,
Okay.
right, for the Breakfast of Champions. And then we had another program called Mastermind Master Body that was
Okay.
about mental health and physical health. So through these programs, Camping to Connect became the fourth program. The name of the organization actually was Young Masterminds Initiative. That's how we incorporated as a nonprofit. It was Mastermind Connect, created the Young Masterminds Initiative.
Got it.
So we were having these different programs, Camping to Connect being the fourth of them, the fourth leg. And the young men that we started working with then, teaching them life skills, having all these different conversations and then mentoring them, then they went to college, right? And some of them have come back from college, immediately joining us as volunteers.
Nice.
Some of them stayed local or close by, like some of them went to Philly, to Temple University, for example, and they would be so close that they would come out to a day hike or a camping weekend, right?
Yeah.
First as junior facilitators, assistants, and now literally leading, right?
I love it.
Which is an incredible thing to see, like that, that journey, that growth,
Yeah.
And we're very proud of that. The program used to be for kids 13 to 18 years old.
Yep.
And since last year, we expanded it to, from 12 to 24 years old, because we realized that because of this loneliness epidemic, just graduating from high school doesn't mean that you're ready for this life.
Absolutely not.
You're still in your formative years, you're still developing your frontal cortex. There's a lot of things happening. These kids are being affected in a heavy, we're all being affected by everything that's happening. But to give an opportunity to continue to develop and to work with them, right? So now we have that combination. And one of the things that we're aiming to do, especially coming into new markets, like we came to Colorado in 2022. Now we are in LA. We're piloting LA this year to be able to work with those 18 to 24-year-olds and sort of fast track them into an apprenticeship model so that they don't have to wait 5 years, 6 years, 7 years.
They can turn around and help
to give back, right? So the way they understood, they benefited from it, the things they learned, they can actually pass it down to that 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old.
Nice.
But they don't have to wait 7 years to get
there. To be able to do that, right? That's amazing. So, for someone listening right now, an educator, a student life professional, student affairs professional, a community leader who wants to support or connect with the work that you're doing, what's the best way to get involved?
Well, we would love access to youth to work with in the cities where we are operating in. We've been asked to go all over the country because we've been featured on NBC Nightly News, The Today Show. Our film is an award-winning film that's being used in conferences and colleges and film festivals. So people have reached out to us from all over the country, but the capacity is not there. We look like a big organization. We're a small team. We're a bunch of dudes that when we had the time,
right?
So then that goes to the other point, volunteering. We have had so many people reach out to us who want to volunteer, but they don't fall within the demographic of who we need, right? We need men of color in particular, and the men of color that, as we go through the onboarding process, or rather screening process, they need to have a level of, again, emotional intelligence. So it's not just like anybody, right? We don't want to put the kids in front of, not because these are bad people, but because
no, absolutely, but they're
outdoor education. Our program is not about outdoor recreation. We do both, right? So the kids recreate.
Yes.
We teach them about live no trace principles. We teach them about the environment. We teach them about how to, about leadership skills in the outdoors. But our program is about neither of those things.
Right.
Social emotional learning in nature. So we need volunteers who are capable and coachable, right? We need funding. Definitely need funding. Like the program is at no cost to participants, right?
Awesome.
So it's no cost to individual participants, not even a dime. But we do partner with some some schools and other organizations that may not have a program like ours, they may have funding, right? And they may want a cohort like of students, let's say a class or
Right.
all young men from a particular school. Now at that point, we can charge a fee because again, these kids enroll with us, and even though that cohort is going to be for their students, once the kids enroll with us, they are directly invited to other programming that has nothing to do with that cohort, where they get to meet the other kids that came through whatever source.
Through the other program.
End up independently through our website, or they're referred by a kid who's in the program to us. They came through a school. They're going to be offered opportunities that are for general participants.
Got it.
Right? So that's at no cost to them.
Okay.
But if a school wants just my students, I want you to take this class out. It's a great opportunity for those students to join our program, to have that entry point.
Yeah, connection.
And for us to be able to get some funding, because we depend on grants, donations, and this type of dynamic to be able to operate and offer it at no cost to the participants that
Fair enough.
us. And again, it's not a one-time thing. It's not a one-year thing. A kid who joins us in at 13 years old, 12 years old, they're going to have access to our program until they age out.
That's awesome.
At no cost. And
at
they're
no
going to
cost.
go to multiple things the same year, programming season. So it's not a one day hike or one camping weekend or 1 year experience, right? So it is a true partnership when you may be a school or an institution that may have a budget and resources that you would have spent with somebody else. Sometimes even transportation, just renting one of these buses with the driver is
so
like
expensive.
$5,000.
Yeah, so expensive. And now gas prices so high.
Right. And for us, like we include transportation. We go get 15
go pick them up.
Vans, So literally, we see it. Like at a school will pay $4,500, $5,000 for a bus to drop off the kids at camp and then pick them up later. Just we can use that funding for a lot more than transportation.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying, right? So there's a collaborative spirit. We have come into Colorado and now into LA by the power of community and collaborations, right? So I didn't know anybody in Denver when I moved here, right? And as far as like community this way, but being able to partner with other nonprofits or schools that learn about like the work we did, then we had access to the kids, access to gear, access to the different things that we needed to be able to operate. Gotcha. So that's how we grow, and that's how hopefully we'll be, all over, the big cities in America eventually. But it's always going to be through the power of collaboration.
Absolutely, I love that. And what a great point. All about community, and an excellent point to end on. Manny, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate you shining a spotlight on what you're doing. This conversation about belonging, brotherhood, and what it means to build spaces where men and young men of color can be fully themselves in the outdoors and in the world is exactly what we need in this world today. So I'm so grateful for your vision, your creativity, and the heart for the work that you're doing. If you want to learn more about Manny's work, we'll include in the show notes the websites Camping to Connect and MastermindConnect.com. And if you're not following us already on Instagram and TikTok, you can search for Dean's Roundtable on both platforms. We'd love to see you there. As always, if you're enjoying the table, please subscribe, share it with a friend, or leave us a review. It really helps people find us. We appreciate you pulling up a chair to the table today. I hope this conversation gave you something to think about, or maybe something to try in your own community. And as always, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And we'll see you next time at the table. Have a good one.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Table Podcast Series. Is your student life program delivering on your mission? Our new K-12 student life assessment moves you beyond anecdotes to evidence-based decisions. Through comprehensive stakeholder surveys and expert analysis, you'll get concrete insights across 8 essential dimensions of student life, from culture and wellness to staff effectiveness and resource allocation. We're seeking founding partner schools to be the first to experience this transformative assessment process and help shape the future of student life evaluation. Today's episode was hosted by Bridget Johnson in conversation with Manny Almonte, produced and edited by Andrew Sigmund, and music by PremiumBeat.com. For any questions, contact information can be found in the episode description. And as always, thanks again for listening.